and welcome to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM, our flagship TV and radio stations here on the Oakland County Megacast. In addition, today we're joined, as always, by Birmingham Area Municipal Access in Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, and the village of Franklin. And today, also 88.1 WBFH, the BFF service of the Bloomfield Hills School District. Joining us online today, as always, we're on CivicCenterTV.com, and our good friends over at the Orchard Mall are our Facebook partners today on Facebook Live. We are broadcasting our entire show today. We thank Kelly Woodley, Doug Cohen, and their entire social media team over at the Orchard Mall for joining us on today's edition of the Oakland County Megacast. And as always, with me in the studio to go over today's latest headlines and talk to all of our interesting guests is Ronnie Dahl.
Tyler, how are you? It's Friday. We made it.
We did. We made it. I am doing well this morning. How are you, Ronnie?
I'm so excited. It is Friday. It's a day to celebrate. But I will say one thing that's not so happy. I heard the S word.
Oh, no.
In the forecast. So we've had amazing weather this week. In the afternoons, have been able to take Trixie Dixie the Wonder Dog out for very long walks throughout the neighborhood, enjoy this outdoor weather. But the front came through yesterday. I will say that's one thing I do kind of remember about my weather days was, when that wind gust comes through and the front is changing and moving through your area. So we're going to see the temperatures drop over the next couple days. We get so spoiled. We do.
And it's been such a nice week, and especially the last few days, we've avoided any sort of precipitation despite forecasts for that being the case. And it does look like some of that stuff is going to be coming in the next few days. It may miss us, but, those things change and they come up our way anyway. So there's always a possibility. But, better we have an S word in the weather than in the weather forecast than an S word in the broadcast.
Okay, I'll kind of go with that, depending on the S word. But I will say, here's my question to you, Tyler. Why is it when it's 65 degrees outside this time of year, right? Because it's all perspective. But 65 degrees outside right now seems so warm.
It does.
Like, I was taking off layers yesterday. It was like, oh, this is great. 65 degrees inside my house.
That's
I'm like,
the worst.
It's freezing. I have to turn the heat back on. And my husband's like, are you crazy? I'm like, it's freezing. And he's like, but it's 65 outside.
I'm kind of in between there, because if it's 65 outside and inside, I don't feel a whole big difference. If it's warmer outside and it's 65 inside, like during the middle of the summer, then I'm fine. I'm chilling. But if it's 60 degrees outside and 65 degrees inside or whatever, or it's equal temperatures, it feels like it's just burning up in there. It's also because my apartment tends to be very drafty, and so all that hot air comes in the summer, and all the cool air comes in during the winter.
Well, I will say, we've had a great weather week, but of course, just in time for this weekend, which is the weekend before St. Patrick's Day, which would normally be a huge St. Patty's Day celebration in Corktown. Mm-hmm. That is not going to be happening this year, although the Gaelic League is opening in Detroit for limited capacity this weekend, very limited, by the way. So still, I think people are going to partake in some St. Patty's Day fun, even though it doesn't officially happen until next week.
Yeah, I would imagine that happens just because we are starting to slowly come out of the pandemic. People are ever so slightly letting their guards down, having a little more fun, trying to get back to some semblance of normal as the vaccine rollout continues and some capacity limits increase. But I also think people are still very much aware of COVID-19 and that they are aware that we're still in the thick of this, so it'll be a little bit more intensive than it was necessarily last year when the initial scare of the pandemic began, but not quite as crazy as it probably will be next year when we are out of all this.
I will admit, secretly, last year at this time I was still working for ATF. I had a friend that worked for the news, and we still went to Corktown, and we're collecting our 5K badges, because it's all about the medal.
Right.
So I do a lot of 5Ks. I don't run them very fast, but I've done the half marathon a couple times, which punishment. I signed up for the half marathon again this year. After the last time, Tyler, I said I'll never do it again. And then we were talking about that amazing view. If anyone out there has ever ran the half marathon in Detroit, it's the most incredible view is to do the half marathon and you run over the bridge, the Ambassador Bridge, and it's always seems to be timed, so the sun is coming up at the time that you're running over the bridge, and then you have the American flag and you have the Canadian flag. It's incredible. Now, running through the tunnel on your way back, not so nice.
Not scenic.
Very hot, a little claustrophobic as well. But so we were talking about that recently with some friends, and I said, "Oh, you have to see that view." So as a dummy, I signed up for the half marathon again. So I've started running in the afternoons, really walking, because you've got to work your way up to it.
Oh, yeah.
But I used to do 5Ks all the time because they're so much fun. They're really a lot of fun 5Ks, and the Corktown one is always a great one to do. So.
Yeah, I haven't done a 5K race in a while. I used to run cross country when I was in high school. Not very well, very injured, but especially in my senior year, I sprained my ankle very often. It was kind of a running. Yeah, it was six times in the season, but who's counting? But I've done like a obstacle course, and it's kind of like mudders on top of that too. So I'm excited to get back to those too with the pandemic. It's kind of giving me an itch to go back to doing some of those and having a little fun in that way outdoors in Michigan over the summer.
You need to try those. I haven't done one yet, but it's on my bucket list.
Yeah,
so.
I did one a few years ago. I did, it was called Muckfest MS. It was an MS charity supporting the National MS Society. That was really fun. That was a lot of fun. Very muddy, but very fun.
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't done one, though, make it as part of your bucket list this year. The beautiful thing about some of these 5Ks that we see throughout the area is they all do support charity.
Yes.
But on top of that, you see people of all age groups, from little kids up to people in their 90s. So it's a great way to get some exercise, but also be part of a community and get back to the community at the same time. Hey, did you by chance catch the president's speech last night?
I didn't catch it live because it was going on while I was still here with our meeting obligations last night. I did see it replayed back later on in the evening, so I did catch it.
Okay. I missed it. I'll admit, I missed it. I was watching... so I'm obsessed with Lisa Ling on CNN and also Mariana Van Zeller on Nat Geo.
Okay.
They're both investigative reporters that kind of go behind the scenes, and they do some of this amazing journalism. So I was on demanding all of that and then missed the president's speech. Yeah. But it really kind of the biggest thing that came out of yesterday, of course, everyone's talking about when are you going to be getting your third stimulus check? And who is getting it as well? I will say I have not received any of this money yet. So I'm like, hey, I'm paying for it. Can I get some? Third round of stimulus cash could start arriving as soon as this weekend for those with direct deposit, giving many an extra financial lift. President Joe Biden signed the American Rescue Plan relief package into law Thursday afternoon, a day sooner than had been expected. So Biden said the relief package was about rebuilding the backbone of this country and giving those who are struggling a fighting chance. Thursday marked the one-year anniversary of when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. The full $1,400 goes to single people earning up to $75,000. A full payment of $2,800 goes to a married couple filing a joint federal income tax return earning up to $150,000. The IRS will use the 2019 tax return information or the 2020 tax return information based on what they have available to calculate the payouts that will be going out soon. So if you haven't filed your taxes and your employment status changed over the past year, you want to go ahead and make that happen. I don't know if there's an appeal process or not, but
yeah, I haven't heard anything about there being an appeals process. I would honestly doubt that there would be one in place for these stimulus checks, considering how they're being fast-tracked to get out there as they were the last couple times, although this time it seems like there's a lot more urgency for it. But yeah, if you have had a change in employment over the last year and you've made less money in 2020 tax year than you did in 2019 on your federal income tax returns, then yeah, it's a good time to get your taxes in right in the thick of tax season anyway. And on top of that, if your stimulus check is going to be impacted on it, these could be going out to some people right away, but other people it could be delayed as it's been the last couple of times. So depending where you are on that list, getting your tax return in time could actually be a benefit to you in the case of these stimulus checks.
So one of the things with this is while they put these numeric deadlines on some of these issues, you really don't know an individual situation. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like there should be some type of process with this as well, but at the end of the day too, I kind of figure, I don't care how much money you're making, you're going to be the one paying for it.
Correct.
So the person who maybe makes or the couple that makes $151,000, they're going to be paying this. So why shouldn't they go ahead and get the money? Because maybe they use that extra money to donate to some of these organizations and some of these charities. So I kind of feel like if you have to pay into the system, you should get the money. I don't care about your economic standing, because I do believe that in the heart of good people, they would end up donating this money anyway.
Yeah, I know a few people that have maintained their employment throughout the pandemic. They haven't had a major loss of income. They haven't had any major financial troubles come up, and they've gotten the first two stimulus checks in full and have donated a large portion or entireties of those stimulus checks to organizations that are helping people in the community, helping people through COVID-19. And so I do think that that's something that a lot of people would be doing in that case if they're getting the full checks and they're not really in need of the stimulus money. So yeah, that's something that maybe should be explored in the future when situations like this arise.
Look, at the end of the day, we're all paying for it.
Right.
We've just passed how many billions and relief fund, and now you passed the $1 trillion one. Give it to everyone. I'm sorry, because we're all going to be paying it. Maybe the people or the entities that live in the overseas groups that you've given billions of dollars to that are not Americans, maybe they should pay back into it as well.
Yeah, that's a valid point too. A lot of this money's been going for aid overseas, not related to COVID-19. It's just extra pork that's been thrown into these stimulus bills, and the American people are paying this money back over time, and those that are getting aid through these packages that are not COVID-19 related and not necessarily allies that are helping us or helping their people through COVID-19 with this, they're not.
Right. If they don't pay it back, they shouldn't get any. Mm-hmm. Okay, done with the rant. But still interesting. So some people are going to be getting that money, but it's like you said, there are a lot of families that have actually saved money during this time because they haven't lost employment. Their employment status and their employment pay has not changed, but because we've all been stuck at home, they haven't actually lost money. They're gaining money because they're not going out as much. They're not paying so much money on traveling, sports, and all of these other events that they would normally do. So, a Michigan Senate authorizes a lawsuit against the governor over relief dollars. On one side of all of this, Tyler, I have to tell you, it's like watching two kids play that can't get along in the sandbox. But on the back side, it's very interesting. From a policy standpoint. So, the Republican-controlled Michigan Senate authorized Thursday a lawsuit against Governor Gretchen Whitmer, setting up a potential legal fight over millions of dollars in COVID-19 relief funds tied to limits on the administration's power. So, keep in mind, this is money that was allocated under President Trump. And the dispute focuses on two policy bills the legislator connected to a portion of the funds in its $4 billion COVID-19 relief fund. The proposals would limit the State Department of Health and Human Services and their orders to 28 days and shift the decisions on school closures from the State Department to local health agencies. Whitmer opposes the bills. If Whitmer's administration spends the money tied to the bills but blocks the limits on her power, it would be contrary to both law and Michigan's constitutional system, said a resolution approved Thursday in a party line vote by the Senate. One thing that we're not talking about with this bickering back and forth between the Republicans and the Democrats, if you're trying to change the bill and the policy, who's to say this doesn't happen down the road and a Republican is governor? So I do think there are merits to both sides of this argument in saying that no one person, we don't live in a dictatorship.
Correct.
There's a reason we have elected officials. And keep in mind, this was one of the big issues with emergency managers coming into some of our communities, such as Pontiac and Detroit, is that we have elected leaders. And so who's to say that, this seems to be a Republican-Democratic fight, but these are laws that would be on the books that, heaven forbid, we have another pandemic down the row and there is a Republican governor, they would have to abide by the same rules in that, look, more people need to have decisions in some of these, or have a say in some of these decisions.
Yeah, ultimately it still comes back to both of these sides need to focus on the task at hand. They need to focus on the real issues here instead of this bickering, because like you said, the next time there is a disaster, whether it's another pandemic or a completely different disaster situation, there may be a need for greater executive authority in decision making. And then if there's we don't choose during a disaster whether or not our governor is a Republican or our governor is a Democrat. That's something that's not chosen in the moment of a disaster. It's something that's usually chosen before or after or during the fact. And so if it is a Republican governor at that point in time, that's going to impede his or her ability to be able to manage the situation. And then on the other side, if it's a similar situation with a Republican governor and a Democratic House and Senate that are continuing to bicker, what's going to happen with that disaster or with that scenario? Is it going to be as chaotic as it's been at times here in the state of Michigan during COVID-19? Nobody in the state wants to see that happen again. It ultimately comes back to the Democrats in the executive branch and the Republicans in the state legislature's complete inability to even listen for a moment to the other side and have an intelligent adult conversation instead of bickering like children throwing sand at each other in a sandbox.
Yeah, this has really kind of been embarrassing, I think, for our lawmakers and what they're going through, because there is an impact that is down the road that goes beyond Whitmer and her administration. And I think there is validity on both sides of this. And I agree. There are times like when this information comes out and you have to make a decision, you can't always get the lawmakers back in office to vote on some of these. 28 days is fair. Plus, we also know UP is not experiencing the same things that we're experiencing here in Oakland County or Wayne County. So should they still have the same restrictions for them that we do? And why is it someone in Lansing is making those decisions rather than the people that are in that community that know that community?
And we spoke about that earlier on the weekend on a similar issue, that those in local areas and local departments, whether it be a local health department, whether it be a local school system and collective like Oakland Schools in our local area or individual school districts in cooperation with the Oakland County Health Division, these local departments know their local area better than anybody. They know the contacts, they know the people who are making decisions at the next level below them and down the line from them a lot better than somebody stuck in the bureaucracy in Lansing, who can still communicate with those powers that be on the local level and provide help as needed or cut in for direction if the direction that's being given by that local department is inadequate or frankly out of line. but it doesn't need to be full power from one sector of the government when we have multiple levels, and this is a very complicated issue where everybody's heads are in a million different places, and if it's all at the macro level where decisions are being made, then a lot of the moving parts at the micro level on the local side are going to be missed, and people's lives are going to be impacted.
But the one thing they have done throughout this, Tyler, is they have allowed so many of the decisions about the local schools to be made by the school districts. And that's where so much even more confusion comes in, because if you need all the power at this level, why aren't you implementing it down on this level? And I think that's where politics really comes in.
Yeah, it's continuing to be a confusing and chaotic situation, and ultimately that does go back to the inability of our leaders in Lansing to take it upon themselves to lead in a situation where we need their leadership more than ever.
So another confusing thing has to go with unemployment numbers. So when we talk about the numbers, things may seem one way, but you have to peel back the layers a little bit to go deeper into those numbers. So Michigan unemployment rate drops, good thing, but a lot of it is simply because people have given up on looking for jobs. So the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says about 270,000 Michiganders were unemployed in January. Yet Michigan paid unemployment to at least 600,000 unemployed workers during each week in January. How does that even work? Like, think of those numbers. Well, the difference is largely because of definitions, different definitions of unemployed, with one count leaving out those who have stopped actively searching for work, and the other including those who have left the workforce. So the number of unemployed Michiganders went from 400,000 in December to 270,000 in January. On the surface, that's a drop. Yes. That's good news. Well, of the 130 fewer people on unemployment, only 10,000 actually became employed. The other 120,000 left the labor force. So you have to kind of peel back and look beyond the headline when it comes to these numbers, because numbers can be manipulated for various narratives.
Yeah, and unemployment's been a huge issue throughout this pandemic. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people who have been at their jobs for many years and have the ability to take an early retirement have taken an early retirement. And on top of that, there's been so much competition to fill those jobs that in a lot of cases, the open positions are not being filled. We just spoke about this earlier on in the week with Dr. James Schwartz from Avondale Schools. We talked about it recently with Ken Gutman. We talked about it a couple days back with Paul Colin from the Bloomfield Hills School Board about trying to find people to take open substitute teacher jobs or jobs that have been unoccupied by teachers that took early retirement. It's been tough for a lot of employers to find replacement employees, which leaves those jobs open with people leaving the workforce who may still be taking unemployment because they've left a job and then decided, well, I'm financially able to retire, I'm staying out of the workforce. And of course, with that, numbers go down, but the unemployment situation has not really changed.
It really hasn't. In fact, it's worse than ever before. But of course, you can always find the latest headlines. Just go to civiccentertv.com, click on the coronavirus tab. That's where we post the latest headlines each and every morning before we head here into the studio. With that, we're going to take a quick break here on the show. When we come back, we are going to be speaking with Reverend Monica Williams from the West Bloomfield Methodist Church. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
COVID-19 has caused many families to fall behind on finances and on groceries. But you're not alone. You shouldn't have to worry about putting food on the table. My Bridges offers access to quality food and income assistance to help families across the state get the food support they need. It's easy to apply and easy to start shopping. Apply for services at michigan.gov/MIBridges. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19, to make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/containcovid. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
With us here on the Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl here in the studios alongside Mr. Tyler Keefe. We spoke with the pastor Tim yesterday, and these are tough times for so many people in the religious faith as we continue to navigate COVID-19. The good things, the restrictions are beginning to be lifted, but the concern has not gone away. With us this morning, Reverend Monica William. She is the lead pastor for the West Bloomfield United Methodist Church. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning. I'm glad to be with you.
How are things going over at your church? We're 1 year into this pandemic.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's already been a year, and yet it's been a long year, hasn't it?
It really does feel like Groundhog Day, doesn't it?
It does. It's amazing, actually, when we look back at all of the ways that we've had to adjust the ways that we reach out to people and do our ministry and our work, and all of us. It's pretty amazing to see how much things have changed. What we're trying to do hasn't changed, right? But the way we do it has really been different.
So, Reverend, can we take you back to a year ago? Because I do believe it was about a year ago this weekend that church services were also closed down. And we remember those beginning days. It was going to be for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Walk us through the beginning stages, but also how you've managed as this pandemic has dragged on.
Yeah, well, for our church, it's actually been an interesting journey. Those early days, I was on a leave of absence at the time, and we had a pastor that was leading the church for a couple months when all of that happened. And so I was not here with my church when they had to move everything online. So the pastor that was here was Reverend Brent Webster, and he did a fantastic job of getting everybody online, and he opened up a Zoom account for the church, and for several weeks we did worship that way, where everybody just logged into Zoom and we did worship live together. And we found that there were some great things about Zoom that brought us all together and gave everybody a chance to see one another and check in, which was so important, especially in those early days, right?
We all knew about Zoom before this, right?
Yeah, nobody knew. We also learned pretty quickly that Zoom is not a very good way to try to sing. I don't know if you've ever tried to sing on Zoom, but music is really hard to make happen that way. It was a bit of a disaster, so
it is.
I had to learn a lot and adjust. Yeah.
So, but with that, so you go through those beginning stages, you miss out on it. Then you come in and you're trying to dip your toes and get reacclimated to this new world to try to minister your congregation. What's it been like for you personally?
It's been a real struggle. You know, there have been times personally where I've been at the end of my rope, and there have been times I've been really encouraged and excited. It's been amazing to watch the people of this church learn how to do ministry in this way. People have really stepped forward and said, we need to learn how to do this, and we're going to make it happen. When I first started at this church, actually a year before that, we had, they lost the pastor very suddenly to death. And on Easter Sunday in 2019, they didn't even know how to turn on their sound system because the pastor had taken care of that. And we've gone from that to being able to live stream our worship services on YouTube and be able to connect together with one another on Zoom. We've learned how to set up a video camera and connect with people remotely in so many different ways. We've it's been amazing to watch the creativity. How can we be together and yet care for each other in this time by not being together?
But as someone who is the pastor, part of those Sunday sermons is the energy you get from the room. What's that been like to lead a congregation without them and their energy around you?
It's difficult. And I've noticed when I look at recordings of my sermons, the energy level goes up and down based on that particular day. I find there's when you're preaching to a room of people, you're really focused on your people. When you're preaching to a camera, you're focused on what's going on behind the camera as much as you are on your preaching, right? So it's a challenge. I actually had a friend of mine just a couple weeks ago logged in on a Zoom call to watch me preach while I was recording it. And even that alone was helpful, just to have somebody who was there specifically just to hear me preach. Finding ways to bring people into the room with you ends up being as important as you go into them in these times, for sure.
Well, we all know that a church is more than the walls that surround it. It is about the members of the church. But this is also such a hard time, because when it comes to stressful times in our life, we turn to the church to help bring us together and help lift us up. How have you been able to do that virtually?
Well, during the virtual times, one of the things we have done is we've made sure that we've used the old-fashioned telephone quite a bit. We have a shepherding ministry where not only I, but several members of our church just go through our roster of connections, people who are members and people who have been part of our church one way or another, and we just call them on a regular basis to make sure that we're connecting with them. If there's things that are going on in people's lives, those folks will let me know so that I can be better in touch with people that have extra challenges. And the number of people who have needed care and have been in crisis this year, both physical health and mental health, has been just overwhelming. I've never had a care list of the size that I have here. I've served larger churches, but I've never had a larger group of people to care for.
Yeah, and I think all churches are pretty much experiencing what you're experiencing as well. Reverend Monica William with us here on the Megacast. She's the lead pastor for the West Bloomfield United Methodist Church. So how have you been able to reach out to them with limited connection? Have you relied on other members of the congregation? I know that typically if you're a member of a church, you have kind of like the old school way was, a phone tree. Or if someone, if someone passed away, then it was your day to drop off the casserole or something of that nature. Are you still doing those traditional things?
We still do that. Yeah, absolutely. We still do those things. And, because we have people that are used to that, and those certainly are ways that we are able to connect more directly with people and on a deeper level. For those times when we need to just keep people informed and all those kinds of things, we've been using email, we've been using YouTube, we've been using Facebook. It's kind of an all of the above sort of a thing. When the weather's been good enough, we have met outside. If everybody brings a lawn chair and wears our masks, and we sit 6 feet away from each other outside, and we were able to do worship outdoors for quite a while the weather was nice. And then from time to time, even we brave the cold and get together just so we can see each other's faces and check in with one another too. So we've tried all kinds of things, and different things work at different moments, I think. And so we've remained flexible with that.
One of the things with me when I see people in person, though, I'm such a hugger, and it's so automatic. So if you haven't seen members of your congregation and then they come in, how do you kind of address that? I feel like it's a new social discussion. I'm not being rude. I'm trying to respect you in your space.
Very much so. In fact, we did at one point consider moving indoors for worship. And we had a whole plan that we had put together for how we were going to make sure that people were socially distanced in our sanctuary, and we were going to make sure we didn't sing, and everybody was going to come in at the last minute, and we would have a brief worship service, and everybody would leave, and we could socialize outside if we were going to, and all of these things. And the team that had planned it got together to try and run it, and none of us could follow our own rules. We couldn't even follow our own rules, and we realized pretty quickly that if we couldn't do it, we couldn't ask the whole congregation to do it, right? And so we ended up not moving indoors because we knew that we weren't going to be able to socially distance, because we are a church that loves to be together, and people want to hug and they want to talk and they want to catch up with one another. And so we needed to find ways to do that didn't provide those opportunities for us to get too close to each other, unfortunately.
So as we start to move into reduced restrictions and the vaccine is becoming more widely available, are you doing any in-person worshiping services right now at all?
At the moment, no. My team that's been kind of tracking how we handle our COVID responsibilities spoke about a week ago, and we are paying attention to the fact that more and more of our members are being able to be vaccinated, but we're not anywhere near that capacity to say we have like a herd immunity even among ourselves yet. We didn't feel like it was fair for us to say, if you're vaccinated, you can come, and if you're not, too bad. But we have, and we also are looking at these new variants that are going on in our nation and in the world, and how we don't know how that's going to impact even the effectiveness of a vaccine, right? So we're trying to be cautious about that. However, as the weather's getting warmer, for instance, for Easter, we're going to have an outdoor Easter sunrise service down at Marshbank Park. And we'll have a brief service where we can be outside together. And we're probably going to have a communion service later on Easter Sunday here out on the church property, where we can be outside for a brief period of time, and it's a little easier to keep everybody and people can be 6 feet away from each other, they can be 20 feet away from each other, whatever feels safest for folks. And people have been really good about learning how to do that outside so far.
Well, fingers crossed that the weather cooperates and it's beautiful that weekend. Reverend Monica William with us here on the Megacast. She's the lead pastor over at the West Bloomfield United Methodist Church. When we're talking about church services, it's not just the Sunday service. We're talking weddings and funerals and baptisms. And I'm thinking, when I plan my wedding, there is so much effort and time and money that goes into it, and then have it canceled or restricted during COVID because of the restrictions and the changes. How has that portion of your church service been?
Yeah, that's been, I've had, especially when it comes to weddings, of course, I've been working directly with couples on what works best for them. We did have one wedding in our church building this summer. And that service ended up being pretty much just immediate family, and everybody in that group was able to kind of self-quarantine for a couple weeks before to make sure that that was a fairly safe experience. So we did do that. That is the only wedding that I did this summer. I have had a couple that just decided to postpone for a year. I have another one that's planning something outdoors and are still deciding how big of a guest list they're going to be able to have. So people are making different choices around that. And it's a hard time to try to be getting married. Funerals are a similar issue, right? The one funeral that I've had to do, fortunately, I've only needed to do one funeral since the pandemic began. And we did that outdoors we had kind of a graveside service with just family. And we're able to make that, this is one of those times where that need to be with each other and care for each other. Sometimes you need to take a little bit of a risk in order to care for each other. There's balancing those needs that people have. Early on in the pandemic, we had my mother and stepfather completely quarantined in their house, and we didn't want them going out for anything. And when we realized it was going to be long term and my stepfather got very sick, we realized this isn't living. There are risks you need to be able to take, and everybody has a different line for that. But to be able to say, being together and having family and having friends, on some level, you need to find space for that, and doing that in the ways that it's as safe as possible. But there are some risks you have to accept in order to keep living your life.
Yeah, and with that, and I think that every family has had similar discussions throughout this entire year as well, because while in the beginning, when we thought it was going to be 2 weeks or a month, we could live with that and we could deal with that. But then as it continued to carry on, people were worried about so many of the side effects too that we're not seeing on the surface. So with that too, you had mentioned at the beginning of the interview about so many people reaching out and they have different needs during this pandemic. This is something we've never experienced in our lives, and we hope to not have to go through it again. But what do you think is going to be the long-term effect for this for members of your congregation? Do you think it's going to be 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, and we're still going to be dealing with some of the side effects of this pandemic?
Oh, well, yeah, I think that this has changed a lot of things for us, and I think a lot of those are permanent changes. Some of those are very unfortunate and sad losses. You think about all of the people that we've lost across this community, across this nation, that we've not even been able to publicly share our grief over. That's going to leave a mark on our nation for years and years to come. There's so many things that will be weighing on us. The way that our kids have been isolated from one another and not been able to be with their friends, be active in the things that they've done, all of those things, you hope that we'll be able to catch up and replace those things. But those have changed lives. Those things have changed lives, no question. On the other side, there's also been this amazing thing where people have become more comfortable using technology that's been available to us for years, but we've never learned to use it. It's always seemed too overwhelming to try, but when that was our only option, my 92-year-olds are learning how to use it, right? Because if they're going to be social, they need to learn how to use their computers a little bit more. And so I'm sure as a church, we'll have a much larger presence in the digital world and be more available to people. I've loved how people that I know on the other side of the world, it's like they're right in my living room. I cooked with somebody in China and in Indonesia last weekend. We did dinner here, and they were making breakfast, and we were able to connect with each other. But that also means that the ministries of this church, we did a partnership fundraiser for Liberia missions this year, and we had the calendar that we were selling, and we partnered not only with a church in Northville, but also one in Georgia. And we were able to do ministry together in a way like it was the same doing something with Northville as it was with people in Georgia, because the distance became like nothing, right? So those have been just amazing, wonderful things to see the way that we've been able to adapt in those ways as well. So there have been some really great things that have come out of this. We've been forced to get creative and change and reinvent how we do things. So it's been a time of great creativity. I think it's cut both ways in that sense.
And in some ways, while we've all had to learn to use technology in a new way, we've also gone back to the basics, which has allowed us to really count our blessings for the simple things as well, especially toilet paper and hand sanitizer. So all of that stuff really is, you start to look at your world a bit differently, and you appreciate the things that we do have. With that, Reverend Monica William, she's the lead pastor at the West Bloomfield United Methodist Church. We so appreciate your time here today.
It's been great to be with you. I had one other thing I wanted to make sure to share with the community, if I could.
Sure, most definitely.
So I've been working as we're coming up close to Easter, the week before Easter is known as Holy Week, and several of the West Bloomfield community churches are going to be having a progressive prayer walk. We're going to set up prayer stations on our church properties, and we're inviting the community to come during that whole week. From dusk to dawn, we're to stop by any of the churches or even all of them, and it's just an invitation to come and have a quiet place to pray and meditate and just reflect as we come towards Easter and spring and all of those things. And we just want to invite everybody to come and know that the churches are still here for you, and we're available. The pastors and the people are here to be part of the community even in these times.
Well, we so appreciate you sharing that with us, and we thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you so much. It's been great to be with you.
Reverend Monica William, she is the lead pastor over at the West Bloomfield United Methodist Church. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. When we come back, a very important conversation with the president for the Small Business Association of Michigan. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it. You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask. Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
You know we'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local. Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together. For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Great to have you back with us here on the Megacast. You can catch Tyler and myself here in the studio Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. until noon. And of course, for those that may not know, this show actually began just about 1 year ago this week as a way to try to bring information to the public regarding the pandemic. You never imagined it was going to last this long.
Oh, no, I did not. We began, actually, it's next week, Thursday. A week from Thursday would have been our first show. We did our first show on a Wednesday, and then our first week began that next Monday over.
And so we are here to continue to bring you long-form interviews as we all continue to try to navigate COVID-19 in this crisis. And I will say the small business owners of the state of Michigan, they are some of the ones that are really feeling the impact. And while we see these big headlines of billions of dollars in relief, trillions of dollars, so many small businesses are still struggling to get some of that money. But even if they get some of the money, it's not enough to carry them to keep their doors open. With us now, let's bring in Brian Calley. He's the president for the Small Business Association of Michigan. Brian, I always appreciate talking to you and having your perspective on the show. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. You know, you'd mentioned the, sometimes the relief is not enough to keep the doors open, but really, there's no substitute for being allowed to have the doors open. That's I like to start every conversation by making the point. People ask, what do small businesses really need? You can't make up for being closed or severely restricted in your operations with grants. It's never going to be a sustainable way of doing it. And so now, as we've seen some steps taken toward backing off on the restrictions. Some industries can now at least begin the process of beginning to recover. But there are some others, like, for example, any business that relies on office worker traffic. Yep. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. They're way down still, and maybe not surviving. And the whole meeting industry, everybody who's around, banquet centers and receptions and weddings, and there's a whole cottage industry around those types of events, and they're still limited to 25 people, and for an indoor event, and that is real. That's as good as closing down banquet centers.
Yeah, and when we do have our politicians that like to stand in front of the podium to talk about the latest grants that are being offered to some of these small businesses, but at the end of the day, the need is greater than the money. And if I can get $40,000 a month, maybe that's going to help me with my, my space that's been closed down. I can't have bands, I can't have people in, maybe. But a one-time payout is not going to help me. So how much longer can they go? And how many business owners here in the state of Michigan are you hearing that are going to close and go to some of our neighboring states?
Unfortunately, it's difficult to get an exact handle real time on how many businesses are going to close because there's no filing. Business doesn't close. They don't check with anybody. Most small businesses just quietly close their doors, so you always see it looking back. But there was some surveys done between different industries. The restaurant industry, for example, did a survey of their members through their main association, and there were 3,000 businesses that had already closed for good. And we know that number was growing every day. Now, getting up to 50% capacity is that definitely helps more of them to reach closer to sustainability in terms of the type of business that they can do. But yeah, and these numbers, a lot of times, like for an individual, like a certain amount of money might sound like a lot, but for a business who is employing, literally paying for the livelihood of a whole team of employees, sometimes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 employees, I think sometimes these numbers, when you hear about grants, it sounds like a lot, but it doesn't cover much payroll. And so that's really the main drive, the main focus, the main mission that we have is not to ask government to do more grants, but to ask government to allow for more wide-scale reopening, especially now that we've seen that the numbers that the workplace is not a significant place of spread. We know that social settings, congregate living facilities, the workplace is the one place where people have to follow the rules, social distancing and wearing PPE and that sort of thing. Is a much more regulated environment. So ironically, the workplace is one of the safer places that a person can be.
I will say I've been really surprised that, number one, the latest loosening of the restrictions was to allow some retail establishments to expand their capacity, because I'm like, I don't know what stores you've been going in, but they seem to be doing fine if they're big box stores, right? Mm-hmm. Like our Walmarts, our Targets, our Menards, they are doing fine. Home Goods, every time I go into Home Goods, I don't know how many times I put down my purchases because I couldn't wait in the line. I have no patience. Everyone knows that about me. So they're not suffering, and there seem to be no capacity limits on them. Like, I don't see any MIOSHA violations against some of these big box retail stores, but there are some with construction and office work and this, that, and the other. And it's like you said, if I go to the office, typically that's safer to me than going to Walmart. So I don't understand the hesitancy in some of the office settings versus, we know Amazon and those stores, they've been back pretty much full capacity.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully that's about to change in terms of loosening up on the office restrictions. But this is one of the things that people in government sometimes have a hard time understanding, is that you can't just take a piece out and have it only affect that piece. The economy is very intertwined, very interconnected. So when you make a change and you say, well, any work that can be done remotely must be done remotely, well, you might look at it and say, okay, so for an accounting firm or something like that, they can still do all their or most of their essential functions remotely. That might be true, but the fact that those that the people that work for that firm are now not in, they might be spending their days in an entirely different zip code from where they otherwise would have been. That affects small retail that relies on traffic. It affects things like dry cleaners. It affects things like office cleaning and eventually even demand for space, our downtown areas. It affects our the income tax revenue coming into cities. I mean, there are so many different impacts. So it's way bigger than just saying, yeah, office workers can work remotely, so that's what they have to do. How about just saying, let's give the discretion back to the employer. We know that they're not just going to rush back full employment into offices when they start easing up on the work or on the rules, but but it is far past time that we start letting them get back in so that these other small businesses that rely on them can start to recover as well.
Because we do know, like, a lot of businesses kind of went to that open concept in the business office as well to try to, raise the collaboration amongst their employees. But they also have the ability to put the cubicles up and do things of that nature, or say, just like our schools have done, okay, A-B days, okay, if you're in Group A, you come to work here, Group B's, you go to work here, and, on Wednesdays we clean the office and we continue on. When I see these executive orders, though, I'm like, what am I missing? Because I'm not the smartest person. I admit it. I'm just a regular person. And I'm like, what am I missing in the executive powers? Why are they making the decisions that they're making if we're allowing casinos to open, and the huge push to get kids back in schools? So what is it about the office environment am I missing that is driving these decisions?
Sure. Like, why is it being singled out? I think that's a very fair question. And I think it is this fundamental misunderstanding that that you can, because a lot of office work can be done remotely, the idea is that it's not really hurting them, so you might as well keep them, set aside for the longest. But it does. I can tell you that I feed off the energy of other people, the other team members, and we can get a little bit of that digitally, but I know that just the energy and the collaboration and the teamwork that comes from being together, at least some, is important. And for an organization like ours, we do compliance education for our members. So whatever the rules are, we're going to follow them, right? So here I am in my basement. I'm talking to you from my basement, right? And this is how we've been doing it for a year. But it's really important that loosen up. And I think it's an apt comparison, especially for, to look at disparities in gatherings of people. Casinos can be at 30%. That's literally thousands of people. It's about 3,000 people. But if somebody wanted to hold an event in Cobo Hall, then it's limited to 25 people. It's literally limited to 25 people.
I'm telling you, and I know you were an elected leader once, so I'm going to say this with a little bit of grace. Do they take a no common sense pill when they get elected and they walk beyond those doors? No, look, I will say I was a federal government employee, and there were days I was scratching my head. I was like, this can't be this hard. Government makes you jump through so many hoops, and I'm like, well, you're just going to make me, I was like, every day I had to be creative to get what I wanted because they made the job so hard. So what is it about the people that are elected? Like, is anyone sitting down with them to explain, hey, you put this rule in place, but you did this and you really look stupid?
We have a very risk adverse environment in the way that this has been managed along. When I try to predict for our members, when will restaurants get up to 50% capacity? The answer is after at least 45. There's data behind this. I mean, I paid really close attention to these things. Only after at least 45 other states have already done it. At that point, if almost everybody in the country has done it, then Michigan will do it. And so it's this idea of having an extremely risk adverse, wait till everybody else moves, see how all that goes, and then once you determine that, then go ahead and move. And with office, because the CDC guidance they haven't gotten around to changing that in a really long time. I think that's been one of the things. And here's the other thing too is, I hate to say it, but it's starting to get ignored a lot. I mean, offices are going back. My OSHA does not have the type of staff that can regulate that. They're not really set up to look at offices anyway. It's mostly construction and manufacturing traditionally have been the workplaces with the dangers that they regulate the most. Now, so the office environment, they're not as well set up for, and even if they tried, they could never get to it all. So the longer they wait, unfortunately, I hate to see non-compliance because there's some risk to the business when they don't comply, but that's what's starting to happen is people are just starting to work their way back into it.
Brian Calley with us here on the Megacast. He is the president for the Small Business Association of Michigan. You are listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. With that, there has been some confusion in some of these orders when it comes from various agencies, MIOSHA versus the health department. So it can make for a lot of gray area for some of these business owners that really want to do the right thing as well.
It can. And here's the thing is that most small business owners really do just want to know what are the rules, and I'll follow them. Make it possible and sustainable for me to follow these rules, and I will do it. And you can see that actually, and maybe if I could put a shout out to that, I think by and large that MIOSHA has actually done a pretty good job of focusing more on education and compliance and helping businesses to comply instead of just throwing the book at everybody. They've done thousands of follow-ups on complaints and inspections, and I think they've done about 100 fines. So overall, I think that they're taking an approach, a compliance-based approach. I would want to point that out. I think where the confusion comes in is that the Department of Health and Human Services and then public health agencies have one kind of mindset and one set of rules and expectations, and they don't always match up with the workplace safety rules that are a completely different Department of State government. And so when you have these two different kind of competing sets of rules and standards, and the ones that the businesses are used to working with, MIOSHA, they do the workplace safety rules, really aren't driving the bus. It's the public health, the Department of Health and Human Services and the epidemic orders. They're the ones that are really calling the shots. So I think that's created some friction inside government, and it's made it so that its compliance is harder because of it. We've
even seen that from a public standpoint, where you will see MIOSHA will list the businesses and the amount of the fines, whereas your local health departments won't. And even if you FOIA that information, it can be hard to get. And so we're even seeing a difference in those two entities from a public standpoint as well. We don't want to always leave on a down note. There are some good things happening. Capacity limits are opening a little bit, but also some new grants are being offered. And we had the president yesterday sign the $1 trillion relief bill. What is that going to mean, the bottom line, for small businesses here in the state of Michigan? Well, in terms of the most recent stimulus bill that the president just signed, it doesn't have a lot of business-specific support in it. The previous one did, though. Mm-hmm. So Draw 2 for Paycheck Protection Program has been well underway. The Biden administration did change the rules to make for sole proprietors, so one-person operations, to get a more advantageous way of drawing down Paycheck Protection Program dollars. So that was a good change. But there's also about a $28 billion restaurant grant program inside that package, but it's words in a bill right now. It has to be turned into some kind of a program by the United States Small Business Administration. That's not us. We're the association, Small Business Association. But the U.S. Small Business Administration will need to turn that into a program. Usually it takes them a little while to do that. They did a shuttered venues grant in the December relief bill that President Trump signed, and that's still not available yet. So moving at the speed of the federal government is not up to the type of standards that we really need to see in the pandemic. But those two industries have built-in money that's not available yet. Performance venues and restaurants, and so hopefully that'll come to bear very soon. Fingers crossed. And with that, before we say goodbye, I have to bring up, what did you think about the billboard in Indiana announcing Governor Whitmer as their business leader of the year? Yeah, we did check. It said from the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. It actually was not the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. That somebody else was just having some fun with that. But, I think that we do have to really concentrate and keep our eye on competitiveness with our neighbors. These are other industrial states that have highly trained, highly skilled industrial employees.
And so when we're competing for these areas that are so intertwined, that we have to pay very, very close attention to when we can get out of step with especially our neighbors. We have to compete with the whole world, but here in the Midwest, I think that it would be easy to lose to Ohio, to lose to Indiana, and to other places. So I think that was kind of a shot across the bow, and one that we ought to pay. We ought to heed.
But we do know, I mean, we're close to the border here in Metro Detroit, and I can say, my family lives in Ohio. We've been going across the border. I'm working on my mom's house, and every time I go across, I'm like, let me get my hair done, let me get my nails done, and I'm going to eat in a restaurant. I'm not going to order out. I'm sitting down at a restaurant because I could. So it's little things, but those dollars add up.
It sure does, yeah, and we did hear a lot about that. I mean, I think that in basically Toledo, service businesses in Toledo have had a lot of extra business specifically from Michiganders.
So we know that we've been saying over and over, support local. We know to support local because these businesses make up the uniqueness of our communities, and it's sad to say every time I go out, I see more and more empty storefronts. But what can people do if on a bigger platform? Should they be writing their elected leaders?
Yeah, I think that when elected leaders hear from people they don't normally hear from, that it makes a bigger impact. So I'll just give you an example. You notice that almost overnight, high school sports came back. And I don't know if you guys saw it or covered it, but there was a huge rally at the Capitol, and it was a bunch of non-political people, just regular people that were like, hey, my son or daughter is a junior or a senior, and they already missed so much of what makes it special. And I demand that they have a little bit of their normalcy and their childhood before it slips away. And so I would say that if you've never reached out to your elected official before, that they know who has and who hasn't. They have a database. They keep track of this stuff. And so if you're a new voice reaching out, and there's a bunch of those, it sets off all kinds of alarm bells, and believe me, they pay attention to that.
Although the governor did say she was not going to be bullied into that decision. It was about the science and the data. However, that did happen. So, Brian Calley, always great having you with us. We so appreciate your time, but also, even more importantly, so many people do appreciate the work that you're doing behind the scenes to help support the small businesses here in the state of Michigan. Thank you again for your time.
My pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast, and when we come back, we are going to be talking about another business, but a business that is actually booming here in the state of Michigan, the cannabis industry. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/contain-COVID.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Parks COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
Great to have you with us here on the Friday edition of the Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl here in the studios alongside the one, the only, Mr. Tyler Keefe. Always excited to make it to Friday.
Yes, glad to be here. It's been a really nice week. We got a nice second half of the show coming up and a lot of interesting guests and conversations we've had over the last week, Ronnie, as we've surpassed the 1-year mark of this pandemic.
And let's hope that we don't go into another 6 months of the pandemic. Obviously, the vaccine is offering hope for so many people because we do need hope right now. I think everyone is definitely feeling the fatigue of the pandemic right now. But one business that seems to be surviving during this this time is the cannabis industry. With us now, we are so happy to bring in Anqunette Sarfoh. She is the board member for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. Q, so great to have you.
So great to be here. Thank you both for the invitation. I appreciate it.
So Q, I always feel like, and I have to ask you this. So when we say, because I know you as Q, Anqunette Jameson. So obviously you were married and now you're using your married name. Did you do that to try to change your identity? Because so many people see you as Q.
Oh no, I'm always Q. It's just Q Sarfoh. That's all. And when I got married, you know how TV goes. When I got married, first of all, I'm one of those crazy people. I actually use my real name on
that
TV.
That is crazy.
I should not have done that. But when I got married, I did ask permission because when you're on TV, your likeness belongs to them and your persona belongs to them. So I asked them if I could, how they felt about me changing my name. And while and there was a general manager at the time who's no longer with us, but he said, well, I'm not one to tell you what to call yourself, but I will say that Anqunette is hard enough. Sarfoh is also quite difficult. So just think about that. And so you take your orders as such. Okay, that's fine. I was already Jameson. So so when I got married, I became Sarfoh. And, once I got off air, I just, said, okay, I'm now officially Sarfoh.
So it makes it hard though, when people know you as one person, because legally Woody did ask me to take his last name. And I will say, I was a little bit like, what? I don't know. It's like you miss a piece of your identity. And so people may not know this, and I don't think you know this, but Dahl is not my legal last name. It's a made-up name. Because my legal last name is D-U-L-L, Dahl. Yeah. And I had a news director one time tell me, your name fits you. You're Dahl. And they would never let me. Okay. You probably couldn't get away with that today, but back in the day, they could say whatever they want. So I went to work for a radio station, and they were like, you can't use that. So they wanted to name me Barbie Belinsky. And I said, oh man, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a real journalist, right? So I was replacing a person who did the headlines, and she used to say, I'm Jane Doe, and now you're in the know. Because you would do the news headlines for 3 different radio outlets, and they wanted to call me Barbie Belinsky, and I said no. So we compromised. They actually pronounced it Dahl, D-O-L-L, but I wouldn't allow them to spell it that way. So I spelled it D-A-H-L. And then once you get the name, it becomes your name. It's very complicated. Do you think guys go through this at all?
No, because you know what though? I think a lot of guys they instantly just have a TV name, because most of the men that I've worked with in TV, they're except the weather guys, those are their real names. But the others, no, those are all pseudonyms. They're all made up names.
Yeah, so Lee Thomas is not Lee Thomas. It was funny. You would see everyone's paycheck and you'd be like, "Who's this?"
Right. Yeah.
And obviously, but Woody's last name Woodruff is his real last name, but Woody was his nickname his entire life. They called his dad Woody as well, but his real name is Edwin. But his mom and his sister call him Eddie, and every time they call him that, I'm like, "Who are you talking to?"
Yeah, see, in my family, my middle name is Michelle. So they call me Michelle. And when I worked in Vegas, I was going to change my name to Michelle and just be Michelle instead of Anqunette. But they sent me out on a flyer before they could announce that I was new. And so it's like, Anqunette. I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's Anqunette now. So, yeah.
Well, we are happy to have you by whichever name that you go through. But we also know, though, your name that so many people connect you to is also a good door opener. And with that, you have been so open throughout this entire time of sharing your story, which I think you have done more for this industry here in the state of Michigan in removing the stigma away from people who use weed than probably anyone else that I can ever remember. And what's it been like to be personal during this?
It's easy. And I've always been an open book, and maybe that's a good thing or a bad thing. So when you're just telling the truth, it's just easy to tell the truth. So if you're gonna stigmatize me or judge me for something, then let me give you the full story. And then you can go ahead and do and say whatever. But know everything, know all the facts, know why I'm doing it, know what it is, know more about it. And then, let's have a conversation about it. So I have to say that nothing but positive things have come since I have decided to go public with my condition and how I choose to treat it. So I'm happy. I'm happy that I've opened a door for more people to look into plant-based medicine and find remedies that could help them have better lives and to tell their doctors about it. So medical professionals can get on board and help more people as well. So if I've had some small part in helping people open their eyes to the truth, then I'm happy and I'm grateful to have that opportunity.
I will admit I'm judgmental when it comes to people who use weed. Don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people who use weed, but I personally have never done it. When I took was going through my federal background check, and you have to say, have you used weed? I'm like, well, I tried it once in 7th grade. They were like, they thought I was lying. And I'm like, no, really,
Here, let's try it again.
I'm like, it's the smell. I can't get over the smell. But so there is a judgment. Like I will say, like, you don't want the weed dispensary in your neighborhood. But
let's talk about that for a moment, because here's the thing: everybody judges. So when people say I'm not going to judge, scratch that. We all judge. We're all human. Let's just embrace it and move on. So when it comes to a dispensary or a provisioning center here in Michigan, why not? Why don't you want one in your community? If you're okay with a liquor store in your community, if you're okay with a bar or a restaurant, if you're okay with a smoke shop or gas station, why not a provisioning center? If you're okay with a drugstore, if you're okay with Walgreens and CVS, why not us? There are lots of, we're beautiful businesses that want to be a part of the community, that are a part of the community, and we need to take a field trip. When are we all going to just go together to a provisioning center so you can see that these are beautiful businesses that will be an asset to every community?
We do know that the state of Michigan recently doled out some of the taxes to the communities. So far in Kegel Harbor, they have not been allowed because of the schools within our area. And you have to be, we're so small, we're 1.8 square miles, I think it is. But now, if I had your store that was in Detroit, that was a cute, adorable store. And I do agree, we have way too many liquor stores. I've never understood that. Like, why can you have a liquor store across from a church? And I think the same conversation should have about some of these other entities, although sadly, so many people in some of our urban areas, the liquor stores are where they get their food because there are no grocery stores. Right. So that is a conversation, I think, to be had. But when I voted to approve it, because I totally believe in the medical side, I thought it was just going to be like, okay, you go to Rite Aid, you get your prescription. But we know it's such a much bigger issue than that. And we need the federal government to get on board.
The federal government getting on board would definitely help those of us in the regulated market, because we would really like to have banking services and a more fair taxing structure. Provisioning centers, for example, are taxed at a rate of 90% because they are taxed under the legal enterprise statutes. So yeah, and then of course there's just trying to get banking services. So many of us have been kicked out of our banks, our personal banks, for our personal issues, not even commingling funds. So yeah, if the federal government could at least provide us with banking services, that would be nice, because they are benefiting from our tax dollars. So why not help us be more in line with the rest of the business community in this country? That would be helpful. But, yeah, that would be helpful.
And I know, because there are so many things I want to talk to you about, because I feel like so many other regular people, such as myself, have these same questions and these same, just kind of the judgment around this whole industry. But one thing we do know, it is a growing industry here in the state of Michigan. But I want to ask you, as someone who is an insider, what does this mean for women entrepreneurs? Can they get a piece of this pie? But even more importantly, what about minorities? Because a lot of people, I think, don't understand. I've been investigating a couple of stories. The big business, some of these big corporations that are behind some of these centers that are opening up.
Sure. Well, first of all, let's talk about women, because this is a huge opportunity for women to get involved in entrepreneurship. And we're already seeing that. When you look at cultivators right now, I still have a caregiver. My caregiver is a woman, and so she has a cultivation facility, and so she's growing. There's a community of women in the cannabis industry called Women Grow. And their mission is to grow this industry and make sure that women are a part of it. So you have lots of organizations like that. You have Canaplusive, you have Tokativity, you have Elementa, you have My Tea Parties. So we have a lot of ways that we're trying to get more people interested in the plant and also interested in the industry. When it comes to minority participation, it's the same. It comes to and then not just this industry. I think that it's important for communities to encourage minority participation and female participation in every industry, because your businesses should be reflective of your community. So if you see a void in that, then it's to the benefit of your entire community to fill that void, and you should fill it with people who are in your community who have an interest. So when it comes to either women, when it comes to minorities, when it comes to anyone, this is an opportunity we will not see again in our lifetime. Okay, this is Prohibition Part 2. And this is a chance to grow a business, to launch a business, and also to help people. You mentioned liquor stores, and I don't want to give any industry a black eye or say disparaging things about it, because I love a glass of wine. But you have people who are looking at this industry and looking at, it's in its infancy. So this is an opportunity, back in the 20s, this is where, the Jim Beam started and all these bourbon houses started. This is now your chance to start at the ground floor of an industry that is only going up. And again, that's really helping people. At the end of the day, we show people how to use plant-based medicine to get rid of general aches and pains of life. And that's a wonderful thing. That is a great thing. We make people happy in a natural way. And that's a beautiful thing. So, yeah.
And it's not like plant-based medicine hasn't been around since ancient times. It's just really kind of realigning the conversation and educating people such as myself. And with that, though, we have to talk about Hash Bash. It's a go this year?
Well, it's a go on your screen at home. It's yes, we're turning it into a televised broadcast. So full production values. We're going to be in this huge studio. We have so many acts lined up, musical acts, educational videos, motivational speeches. And we have our lineup includes the governor, the attorney general, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, I think Eli Civic, who is making a lot of news lately as the Washtenaw County district attorney, I believe. Let's see. I'm emceeing it. Leila Abadi is doing a lot of music throughout. And so people can check it out on twitch.tv/A2#. So it's going to be televised. You can just watch it at home from the comfort of your home.
That's great. It's always great talking to you, and I so appreciate you and your story and your courage to tell your story. But not only that, you're so enthusiastic about life. It's infectious. We've had a couple of the people, the mayor on from the city of Pontiac, and I know that the city of Pontiac, they're really waiting for the administration there to basically get off their butts and issue the license to some of these business owners, because that's one of the things that's kind of, contributing to so many of the, storefronts being empty in the city of Pontiac, because they're waiting to find out if they're going to get the license. So you have patience and you have grace to help us all navigate this new world of cannabis. So we so appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, every community has the opportunity to opt in and draft the ordinance that best suits their community. And while that's a great thing, and we encourage communities to opt in, sometimes it does seem to take longer than a lot of people would like. But we do have resources available at the MICIA if communities want some guidance. Our organization works with municipalities all the time. So if those municipalities are trying to figure out the best ways to draft their ordinances to reduce their risk of litigation, please reach out to us at the MICIA. That's what we're here for.
And I know that there is a huge effort behind the scenes, too, to try to help so many people that were convicted for weed issues through the decades, because there are people that are locked up behind bars right now that shouldn't be there. And so I know that there are so many people helping to push that effort, and let's hope it continues to gain steam in 2021. Q, anything maybe we didn't touch on that you want to mention before we say goodbye?
Oh, sure. Real quick. So if people want to participate in expungement efforts and making sure that people who are convicted of marijuana crimes are reintroduced to society on a good footing, reach out to the Redemption Foundation. And also, if anyone would like information on how to use cannabis and how to use CBD and THC and all the cannabinoids in their body, all the cannabinoids that are available, they can join us at my monthly tea parties there at the end of the month, the last Thursday of every month, at cultureclub.com. And so we have a cannabis nurse. She's an RN, and so she's available to answer any of your questions when it comes to how to use cannabis for medical issues. And this month is MS Awareness Month, so happy MS Awareness Month, which is why my colors are in orange this month. And so we're going to talk about MS and autoimmune conditions and how cannabis and CBD can help mitigate those conditions. They help you deal with living with those conditions. So please join us, cultureclub.com. And culture is spelled with a Q because I'm Q.
Well, with that, Q, it's been great having you. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate your expertise as well. Thank you so much for being with us. Continue to educate people such as myself.
Always. Glad to do it. Thank you for being a great student, by the way.
I try every day. Anqunette Sarfoh, who is also kind of known here in the community as Anqunette Q. Jameson. She was on Fox 2, but is now a board member for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast, running a little bit behind schedule. When we come back, we'll be speaking with the owners for Nosh Pit Detroit. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits? Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green or blue.
But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Wear a mask.
The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Dr. Faust, the Medical Director for the Oakland County Health Division. The most important thing you can do to prevent the spread of illness is to wash your hands thoroughly and often. Follow these 6 easy steps every time you wash your hands. Step 1, turn on the sink and wet your hands with warm water. Step 2, apply soap to your hands and lather between your fingers, under your nails, and the front and back of your hands and wrists. Step 3, wash your hands by scrubbing them together for at least 20 seconds. Step 4, rinse your hands with warm, clean water. And step 5, dry your hands with a clean cloth towel, a paper towel, or hot air blow dryer. If you're using a cloth towel, make sure to change it often. For handheld faucets, turn off the water using a paper towel instead of your bare hand. Step 6, if you're using a paper towel, throw it away. Practice healthy habits like washing your hands after coughing or sneezing into them to keep you and others healthy. Go to oakgov.com/health or call Nurse on Call at 1-800-848-5533 to learn more.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us here on the Megacast. The Friday edition underway, just about 30 minutes left in the show. As a reminder, you can always catch us on Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. You can also tune us in to Channel 15 on Comcast, 99 on AT&T. If you're out driving around, listen to us on the radio, 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM, The Biff. Tyler, my meeting, I'm going to be jumping out of the show a little bit early because I have a meeting in Royal Oak. And I will say, after my meeting, I'm going to stop by here. Joining us now on the Megacast, Karen Kahn. She is the owner and CEO, and Stefan Kudek, the executive chef for Nosh Pit Detroit. Great to have you both with us here on the Megacast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have to say, Stefan, I love your shirt.
Oh, thank you. It's one of the many designs we've stolen over the years.
Well, with that though, do you feel like the two of you have had to be superheroes to navigate COVID-19 and the pandemic and keep your business running?
Yes, we actually have. We have had to go through a lot of unpredicted things, but we've always managed to re-steer the ship and keep going, and we are making a miracle happen by reopening in the tail of COVID.
So give us a rundown, give us a background on your business. I know that you guys started, I believe, as a food truck, and then you've kind of grown. So give us your story. How'd you get started? How'd you two meet, by the way?
We have a friend group that used to do monthly potluck, and we just met through her ex-husband is a good friend of mine, so we met that way. And she was looking to get out of her job, and I was between jobs, as they say. So we idly talked about starting a food truck, and we both were interested in the idea, and then she moved to Israel for 6 months. So it kind of was slow to get off the ground. But then when she got back in the country, I was working by that point, but I mean, really wanting to work for myself. So the two of us kind of got all of our ducks in a row.
Yeah, what he's leaving out is that we did this at 40 with kids.
Yeah, talk about people who like to take on a challenge.
Yes, we kind of, as adults, decided that we wanted to do something totally different than we had been doing before, and we did something crazy where we kind of didn't see our families for a couple years, working every day. You always say when you start a business,
We're kind of breaking up with the two of you here for just a second. So let's see if we can. Karen, I think sometimes we're with the internet, when we move around, it slows us down. So can you repeat the last thing, but try not to move around because it's delaying your signal.
Sure. I said we had no idea how much work we were going to get ourselves into, but we've been doing it now for almost 7 years. Starting from catering to the food truck to a restaurant, to now we have 3 food trucks. We've moved along, and we're very, very excited to be opening in Royal Oak.
See, the universe brought you two together. Yes. To put you together on this adventure, and it's been just that. Tell us about the past year, though.
In a lot of ways, our background as a food truck helped us out immensely in this past year. A lot of restaurants had the struggle of how do they transition their food from dine-in to primarily or entirely to go. But because we came from a food truck, our food is inherently thought of as to-go food. So we were fully versed in, packaging and prepping stuff so that it's still good by the time you get home and all that type of things, and doing things with a very small number of staff. So we were able to keep most of our staff almost the entire year. We were between locations between the middle of January and now, so we had to furlough our staff for about 6 weeks. But other than that, we were able to keep our entire full-time staff on for the whole past year.
You forget the 2 weeks. There were 2 weeks where it was just me and you.
Yeah,
I remember 2 weeks.
At the very beginning, it was just she and I doing everything, because that was the very beginning of lockdown, and we didn't know what was going to be what. So
and we stayed open.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then after those 2 weeks, we realized that people are still doing carry out. People are still not wanting to cook for themselves. People are still wanting our food. So we were able to bring people back pretty much.
And you left out all the fun stuff we did. We started a food pantry.
You did? I was thinking you were going to say, that one time that I was so sick of you, I locked you in the closet, but no, you guys got along.
Point where we were yelling at each other across the restaurant.
And that's just a normal day.
Yeah. So. Yes. But we did indeed accomplish a lot for our community during this process. We did indeed help a lot of other vegan restaurants and other businesses that were around as much as we could. We also did want to give a shout out to Chef Phil, who did help us with our food pantry and just won Chef of the Year today for Detroit.
Awesome. Congratulations.
This COVID for us restaurant owners has been a time of coming together, because we're all in the same situation where even if it was good before, we're all in this together right now. Yeah.
With that, we've heard so much about the restaurants, right? And people are saying, hey, okay, they're starting to be able to reopen. We're back at 50%. Food trucks have really kind of been the lifeline for so many restaurants to be able to get out. But the one side of the industry I feel like that hasn't been talked about has been the catering business side.
We took a 90% drop this year in catering.
Wow.
We had to give out back over $30,000 of wedding deposits for the past year.
Holy cow.
A lot of cancellations of weddings. The good news is we had 1 or 2 come back this year, and we're hoping to see a very busy wedding season this year for our wedding catering side. But
yeah, if all goes well, everybody that postponed last year will be back this year. And
knock on wood.
Yeah, it seems to be, we're getting a lot of inquiries. So hopefully it's safe for people, and people remain confident in what the future is going to bring.
We are so, I think this summer and this fall is going to be crazy, because we've all been so under restrictions. We're going to be just like, we're free. But with that, though, What do you think has happened to you and your business? We know it's been a struggle, and there has been a lot of support behind the scenes to support local. But beyond that, what strengths do you think the two of you learned because of this crisis?
You go first.
Well, I mean, we've always...
It's okay if you're still trying to figure it out. I am.
Neither of us have a food background, really. I worked as a baker briefly before we started this business, and Karen came from, what is the industry that you...
Sustainability services.
Sustainability services. So neither of us had a food background, so we don't know the proper quote unquote way to do anything. We just have to figure it out as we go along. So that mentality of getting in sort of, let's figure this out, that mentality of like, what is the least amount of money we can spend because we don't have any money to spend, you know, that sort of mentality that got our food truck up and running has basically allowed us to keep our head above water the past year.
I think what he's trying to say is we're very scrappy. We're parents. We're used to using the duct tape to hold something together. And it does.
Karen Kahn with us here on the Megacast, along with Stefan Kudek. They are the owner, CEO, and executive chef for the Nosh Pit Detroit. With that, so what are your hours? Is your restaurant open right now?
Not yet. We just got the health department approval, but we still have fire and building to go. So we're about a third, if not halfway there. We have a few more inspections, and we'll be announcing our open date hopefully before the end of the month.
So you're expanding in the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You're brave. You are so brave.
Thank you.
Brave is one word for it.
He thinks I'm nuts, but yes, same thing.
But in the meantime, because we know catering is kind of on the wayside, how can people find out more about your menu and what sets you apart from so many of the other restaurants that are out there right now?
Well, our food truck won Best Food Truck in Detroit for 3 years in a row through Our Magazine. And that's, as a vegan truck, that blew our minds because vegan food is not usually the most popular food truck for us. To be awarded that means that we're doing something good. So we're really proud of what we've done. And we will be open soon. And
as soon as we can be.
Yes.
NoshPitDetroit.com is our website, and we're on all of the social medias at Nosh Pit Detroit. So we're always updating with, where we're going to be, when we're going to be open, all that good stuff. So we have a good internet presence, and people can find us there.
And a GoFundMe.
Yes, on the GoFundMe.
How important has local support been for your company throughout this pandemic?
It has kept us going. Not only have we received funding over $8,000 to help us get through this month in payroll, we decided to use our own staff to do the painting rather than hire a painting company because we'd much rather keep our people working. And we have gotten people who are coming in and just volunteering their time to help us get open sooner because they're our fans in our community, and we're grateful for it.
Well, I was on my way to Royal Oak, but I guess I'm going to have to wait until your restaurant actually opens. But we do wish you continued success. Fingers crossed that this is over soon and that by the time you open your doors, you'll be able to have full capacity to help support you on your mission.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been great talking to the two of you, Karen Kahn and Stefan Kudek. They are the owner, the CEO, and executive chef for Nosh Pit Detroit. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast, and when we come back, Patrick Watson, the superintendent for Bloomfield Hills Schools, will be joining us on the Megacast.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask. Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
You know we'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local. Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together. Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe. You're listening to us on Civic Center TV, 89.3 Lakes FM, Birmingham Area Municipal Access, and on the web and on the radio as well on 88.1 WBFH, The Biff. That is a service of the Bloomfield Hills School District. And joining us now on the program, our last guest today is the superintendent of the Bloomfield Hills School District. Patrick Watson joins us now on the Oakland County Megacast. Pat, thank you for being with us today.
Good morning. Thank you. Appreciate it. How are you?
Doing well. How are you? How are things going over in the Bloomfield Hills School District? Yeah, school's now starting to return back to some in-person learning following the governor's goal of that March 1st return.
We're doing well. You know, we've been back since early February, and so that's gone incredibly well. And we're also planning out our full return coming up in the next few weeks here. Potentially looking at April 5th as the main date, but also realizing that with House Bill 4048, we're looking at what the implications of that might be for us here in Bloomfield Hills. Part of that bill requires every student to be offered 20 hours of in-person learning by March 22nd. So wait and see exactly how those hours are going to be calculated. However, we can only wait so long until we make our final decision of what we'll need to do to qualify. As far as funding, it would be an additional $2 million that would be provided to the school district to educate students if we meet that deadline.
So as of now, with that being the case and your plans for meeting that deadline once you get the full regulations of what needs to be done to be qualified for that, what's the difference between the current in-person method and hybrid methods that are in place and what may be the case at that point in time?
Right. So right now we're planning for a full return on April 5th. That would be everyone that wants to come back in person able to come 5 full days a week. During lunch, we would have 6 feet of social distancing. And during class time, we would have 3 feet. There's a recent study out of the state of Massachusetts where they looked at all their students that have been in person, and they found that there really isn't a difference between 3 feet and 6 feet of social distancing in buildings and classrooms regarding the spread of COVID-19 being transmitted. And so looking at that report and looking at other, whether it's in North Carolina or Wisconsin or what was done in the UK, their reports, that's why we've relaxed the social distancing to 3 feet in our buildings. Now, depending on what we need to do for House Bill 4048 and how it's calculated, we may need to look at some type of modified schedule for the week of March 22nd before we go off to winter break. to make sure we can capture the funds. Again, we're looking for some additional guidance out of Lansing, how those hours are going to be calculated. If by Tuesday, March 16th, we don't have an answer, I'll be delivering a presentation to our board and our community with the next steps we need to take to make sure we qualify for those $2 million. Again, we're looking at March 22nd, the following week is spring break. We already have a full return plan for April 5th. We don't want to let that 1 week before winter break determine whether or not we're going to be able to qualify for $2 million, which can do a lot of good for all of our students here in Bloomfield Hills.
Yeah, let's talk about that. What is some of the good that can be done with that $2 million at this time? Because this has been such a difficult year for navigating how to put district dollars toward the best efforts of educating the kids, providing what's needed for the educators to relieve them of some of the pains and the trials of teaching during the pandemic. And then on top of that, all the other programs and all the other needs in the school district that were already being talked about and already being planned around pre-pandemic. What would those $2 million do for the Bloomfield Hills School District at this time?
One of the things we're really looking at is our K-5 class size. We already have low class sizes. That's something that's great about what we're able to offer here in Bloomfield Hills. But the ability to hire some additional teachers to even lower those class sizes a little bit more, we feel that can help us leverage what we need to get done next year from an instructional point of view, and also makes it easier for our teachers as they return to have smaller class sizes. So they're able to spend more time on a one-on-one or individual basis with the students for next year to really gauge where they're at, and knowing that they'll need to continue to provide differentiated instruction, really meet the needs of our students by having a smaller class size.
We're joined by Patrick Watson. He is the superintendent of the Bloomfield Hills School District with us today on the Oakland County Megacast. And throughout the pandemic, when there has been a hybrid method and there has been an ability to have some students in the schools, you have provided leeway for students on days that they have either been feeling under the weather or just not felt like coming in, or had other reasons, maybe within their families, that they were not opting to go into school and instead be educated virtually. With students returning to that in-person date, April 5th being the planned full in-person option, is the school district still providing options to families that would prefer to have their kids continue to be educated virtually during the pandemic, and for those that may be on days where they're not feeling like coming into the school building or not feeling well and under the weather, to continue to have the distance learning options?
We are. So one of the great things we've been able to provide is some stability for our parents in some sense. For example, if you're a K-12 student and you're currently virtual, you still can remain virtual. You don't have to switch your teacher whatsoever, which has been a great benefit, having that stability of the same teacher all year long. At the high school level, our students have been able to make a day-by-day decision. What we're asking them now is, now that we know more about COVID-19, we'll still give them the flexibility, but we need them to commit one way or the other. Either I'm going to stay home, I want to be virtual, it's worked out for me great, I'm happy, great, you're there. And then for those that are coming in person, are you pretty much going to come every day? We know there's going to be exceptions. If you don't feel well, things come up. And we were looking to kind of have students kind of really pick one of those, but still have the flexibility. So teachers can plan. Right now, we have some students that have been able to come 4 days a week instead of 2, based on the number of students that are staying home and being able to Zoom in during the day. But we want to provide the teachers with the best opportunities to plan for a fuller return when students come back.
The teachers have had such a difficult time during this pandemic to continue to do their jobs. They've been working extra hard around the clock when they were still teaching in schools and over the summer as well, planning for this school year as the pandemic continued on. There was a lot of uncertainty around the vaccination process and the exit strategy of this pandemic. So let's talk about that a little bit. We asked earlier on in the week the same question to Avondale Superintendent Dr. James Schwartz. How are the teachers holding up in the Bloomfield Hills School District as we've now crossed the 1-year threshold, where a year ago they were suddenly switching from in-person curriculum to being fully virtual in a matter of days and really a matter of hours at times?
You're right when you say they've really worked extremely hard and they've done well. Teachers are tired. right? They're exhausted, you know, having to go through the pandemic. I think it's also important to remember for a lot of our teachers, they're also parents. So not only are they working and doing what so many people are also doing, I get, but then they're parents on top of that. And they're going home and having the same struggle that other parents are having when they get home. I'm incredibly grateful for the professionalism and the hard work our teachers have been put in this year, and their creativity. I had the chance to, our Bloomfield Virtual, which is K through 5, I sat in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and fifth grade class. And it is remarkable to see what our teachers are able to do in an online setting. I believe it's second to none. I think we're also looking forward to next year and learning or taking what we've learned from the pandemic as far as some of our new best practices and creating a new normal for school and what that's going to look like for our students, especially at the higher level, like the high school level. Just having that flexibility to have classes in person, have classes online, but having your classes that are online taught by a Bloomfield Hills high school teacher. Again, that was one of the benefits of our plan this year. Our students didn't have to work with a third-party vendor. They had Bloomfield Hills high school teachers. They were able to keep their schedule. They were able to stay home or come in. And I think it was a great response to the pandemic. There's no ideal model, right? So if we back all the way up to August, here we are in Bloomfield Hills. We're on Zoom meetings with educators from Israel, Denmark, Japan, South Korea, Canada, talking about best practices. We also had over 20 other school districts from around the country with us as part of this consortium we built to look at best practices. At the end of the day, there's pros and cons to every hybrid model. It's not going to work for everyone. So it's not like, oh, we should have done what this district did. This is great. Well, for certain sect of parents, I'm sure it really is. We kind of focused on what we thought would be in the best interest of our students, and especially, again, going back to high school, how can we help with their mental health? Well, knowing that you're going to keep your schedule, knowing that you have flexibility, knowing that you're going to have the opportunity to decide whether or not to come in. And they were able to also put in something called Black Hawk Hour, which allows students to get small group and more one-on-one attention. And it pushed our school back, or start date for the high school, all the way back to 9:30. And so that's proved very beneficial for our students as well.
And how are some of those changes being explored for the future? You talked about some of the benefits that came from having the later start, and there's been a lot of discussion on that in the educational field and the educational realm over the last several years, even dating back to when I myself was a Bloomfield Hills Schools student, about the potential need or benefits of bringing particularly the later school levels into a later start time for their education, for their general well-being. Is that being discussed after things have been operated during the pandemic that have worked out successfully for your students?
That's definitely being discussed. You know, coming up in April or May, I'll be bringing a proposal to the board to move the high school to a later start time. What that time is still yet to be determined. But this is a 20-year conversation that's been going on that you alluded to in public education. You look at the American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC recommendations, and all the data that's out there clearly states that a later start date, not just for adolescents, but for all students, is beneficial. So we'll be exploring that, and I'll be making a recommendation to the board in the next couple months about a path forward for having that. The other thing that is we realize is that for some people, they love the virtual option. Their students will thrive. They love the flexibility. We have parents that are in our virtual academy that are out of state and out of the country, whose students participate every single day, and they loved it. So we will next year have our Bloomfield Virtual K through 5 still available. We'll also have, for those students in grades 6 through 12 who want a full virtual experience, that opportunity for them as well for next year. And we're not thinking it's going to be because people feel there's a health benefit to it or they're at risk of coming potentially into the building. We're seeing that, again, we will have some. We're seeing as for those that this was a model that works best for their child, they want to continue with it. And one of our goals is to make sure we provide those opportunities for our parents and for our students.
Patrick Watson with us. He's the superintendent for the Bloomfield Hills School District. Pat, just another minute or so left before we have to say goodbye today. Looking back, we have crossed the one-year threshold since the pandemic began here in the state of first affected the state of Michigan since COVID-19 was first declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization and by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Looking back on the last year, what have been the biggest lessons or the greatest lessons, most important lessons that the Bloomfield Hills School District has learned along the way?
I think it's to take risks is one of them. Talking about how we go about instruction and being willing to say, just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. And one thing COVID-19 has really done for all of us in education is made it okay to go outside that proverbial box, right? And let's try something new. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And having that growth mindset, because no one's really done it before. There's no game plan. Okay, when the pandemic hits, here are the things you need to do in your crisis plan to make sure you're successful. And so I think that freedom really allowed our staff and our teachers to really be creative with how we educated our students. And they really nailed it time and time again, which has been just a great pleasure to see.
Well, Pat, we appreciate having you on today. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Patrick Watson with us on the Oakland County Megacast. He's the superintendent of the Bloomfield Hills School District. That is going to do it for today's edition of the Oakland County Megacast and for this week's episodes of the program. You can join us Monday through Friday live, 10 a.m. to 12 noon on our family of TV and radio stations, as well as for replays throughout the week on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. Find all of our episodes, civiccentertv.com/megacast. This has been the Oakland County Megacast.